Good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's presentation on uncovering indirect spend and reclaiming lost profit. This is Caroline Lyle, the Director of Marketing for Transportation Insight and your moderator for the next hour. Before we get started, I want to review a few housekeeping items and let you know how you can participate in today's session. If you are experiencing technical problems, please email us at marketing@t-insight.com for immediate assistance. Please know we are recording this session and will make it available to you after the presentation. A large part of the hour today will be devoted to our featured presentation, after which we will have time for questions. We can take your written questions through the questions pane shown here, where you can simply type in your question and click send. Okay, without further delay, let's get our program started. Our presenter today is Gene Smith, Director of Sourcing Solutions at Transportation Insight. Gene has more than 30 years of experience as a packaging professional specializing in operations, spend analysis, benchmarking, implementation, and supplier management, along with specific expertise in commodity price trends, RFP development, and contract management. A graduate of Clemson University, he earned a Bachelor of Science in Financial Management. Thank you for joining us today, Gene.
Thank you, Caroline. First, let me just say thank you to everyone that's dialed in and logged in today. Appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to participate with us this afternoon. Caroline, I'm not sure about that note there on Clemson University. I hope we didn't lose our Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina fans during that time, but hopefully if you guys were hanging there with us for a few minutes, we'll give you some good information here for this afternoon. If we think about really why we're here today, one of the goals as we think about managing our indirect spend, one of our goals today is to present, discuss, and provide you a really straightforward, common sense type approach to managing your indirect spend. And really more importantly, we want to give you some actionable steps that you can immediately deploy within your own company that will have a positive impact on your company's bottom line. Important note here, understand as we talk through some of these steps, a 20 to 30% reduction in these indirect expenses is definitely within your reach. So let's jump into it and define what we're talking about here today when we're talking about indirect spend. We're looking at goods and or services that are not included or incorporated into the product that's being manufactured. You know, this is one of those topics, if you ask 50 people, you know, tell me what your indirect spend is, you may get 50 different responses. For today's discussion, we're going to look at some common products, such as office products, office supplies. We'll also touch on maintenance, repair, and operational supplies, maybe better known as MRO supplies. This is the big bucket. This is one of those categories that typically when we're doing spend analysis for our clients, we will actually break this down into really what we consider subcategories or smaller buckets. It may be electrical supplies, power transmission supplies such as bearings, belts, could be safety supplies, janitorial type supplies, and then what I call the MRO consumables, the small nickel and dime type products. We'll also be considering IT products as part of this indirect spend. It could be capital goods, machinery that you use in your facility. Could be packaging equipment, material handling type equipment, as well as packaging supplies themselves. For some companies, they may look at packaging as direct supplies. We're focused primarily on the indirect supplies, what we consider the out-the-door type secondary packaging. Really the products that it takes to move your products, your finished goods from point A to point B. If we think about some of the common services that typically roll up as part of your indirect spend, it could certainly be cleaning and janitorial type services. Those folks that come in to maintain your facility, to keep it clean, could be grounds maintenance on the outside of the facility as well. Also, travel expenses. This is a big ticket item for a lot of companies, hard to get your hands around because these expenses are often hidden on expense reports or on procurement cards. Oftentimes, those are hard to get your hands around. Marketing related type expenses, human resources related type expenses, as well as your utilities such as gas, water, and electric. So as we move forward and consider these indirect expenses, we want to talk about some of the challenges around managing this spend. Why is this spend so difficult to get our hands around and to get under control? First and foremost, it's hard to identify. There's little visibility in a lot of companies as to where these expenses are. The spend is very fragmented. At the end of the day, you just got a lot of people buying stuff, multiple people at multiple facilities buying these supplies. So it's hard to identify. Inaccurate data is another challenge when you think about indirect expenses. Hard to get your hands around that data. Maybe the specifications are incomplete. Stuff gets put into the wrong GL codes. Again, the data is typically inaccurate as it relates to indirect spend. And then limited market knowledge. We just don't know really in a lot of cases who to turn to really help us manage this indirect category like we should. If you think about some of the other challenges, procurement constraints comes to mind. One of the first things we hear oftentimes when we're working with one of our clients is, we just don't have a lot of spend in those categories. It's perceived low dollar value. We really have no leverage to really negotiate with. One of the guys I work with on my team, he likes to always use the analogy of, well, we're talking about a lot of nickels and dimes here that over time adds up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in some cases even millions of dollars. Never will forget, we're working with a client based out of the Midwest, had 8 locations across the country. We were looking at their MRO consumable type items. Again, it's those nickels and dimes, your fasteners, your safety supplies, your nuts and bolts, your drill bits. Again, small ticket items. We rolled that up across these 8 facilities, looking at about 30 different suppliers. They had a spend of just over $1.3 million. We worked with them, showed them how to take right at 14% out of that $1.3 million spend, and instantly sent $200,000 straight to their bottom line. The other constraint from a procurement perspective is, again, tactical activities. You just got a lot of people buying stuff. You got people maybe spending too much time on the phone, trying to talk to multiple suppliers to get pricing. So we'll talk here in a little bit about how to move that tactical activity into more of a strategic type model. One of the other constraints is the manual processes. And oftentimes there's no real automation to track these products or to track this spend. There's no process in place, and also a lack of supplier knowledge. Just from a procurement perspective, just not real having a good understanding at that facility level or that tactical level of who can really help us here. Limited internal resources is always a procurement constraint. Again, we've worked with a number of companies over the last 20 years, and a lot of those procurement resources have been allocated to the direct side of the business, which, if you think about it, kind of makes sense. Big dollar items, big ticket items, usually a smaller number of SKUs, a little bit easier to get your arms around that and manage that. So those professional procurement resources have been allocated to that direct side, and in large, the indirect space has gone without really a lot of attention. One of the other procurement constraints is really the oversight and the management of the process from a procurement level. Again, you look at limited resources. Procurement folks are really spending their time in other places. So without those additional resources, or without that resource coming alongside you, it's difficult to provide oversight and management of these indirect expenses. Again, there's no real formal procedures in place. Again, from a management standpoint, there's no real reporting in place to provide you with the visibility that you need to really manage these categories. And again, the lack of tracking of spend and the lack of visibility of any savings which may be generated is a constraint from a procurement perspective. So today we want to look at really 4 basic steps to enable you to manage these indirect expenses more effectively. First, we'll look at identifying, categorizing, and prioritizing these expenses. We'll talk a little bit about moving from a tactical model to more of a strategic model. We'll talk about some initiatives that you can put in place that will allow you to be proactive and not so much reactive to these expenses. And then last, we'll talk about ongoing measuring, reporting, monitoring these expenses and celebrating some of the wins that we'll have. So if we think about step 1, and really this is where you have to start, it's identifying, categorizing, and prioritizing these expenses. You want to look at, what are we really spending in these categories? And again, oftentimes companies don't know, but the shocking number here is that we realize that as much as 40% of our expenses could fall in to this indirect arena. Again, we worked with a lot of companies over the last several years. We typically see a range there anywhere from 20 to 40%, but that's a big number, again, when you roll it up. So if you want to look to identify and categorize these expenses, I always like to start with AP level data. If we start with AP level data, we're simply at this point looking at a supplier name, the products that are being purchased from that supplier, and the total dollars that's being spent. I like to think of this as that we're loading this spend into individual buckets. Once we get those dollars loaded in, then it can begin to give us a little bit of a roadmap of where we want to go and what our strategy will be for attacking these. One of the things we'll talk about later, and Caroline will mention to you later, is an offer that we'll make to you guys that are participating with us today in the webinar, where we'll do some of that spend analysis for you, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. If you think about establishing your priorities and developing what I like to call my strategic plan around these categories, taking what we've used in our AP data analysis, our spend analysis, at this point we begin to establish some priorities. We'll begin to establish our strategy of how do we attack this. One way may be look at what's most impactful. What's the biggest bucket? Where are most of the dollars? If you're going to spend time, then make it worthwhile. Look at those areas where you've got significant spend, and if you're able to make an impact, then that impact will be most noticeable to your bottom line. One of the other strategies is you may want to look for low-hanging fruit. Oftentimes when we engage with a new client, they'll want to start with something like office products, and that's okay. That's a good strategy. Let's start with something low-hanging fruit, easy to get your hands around the data, easy to do some benchmark analysis, and oftentimes you can build some wins off of that, and then dive deeper into maybe some of the other meaningful categories. Another area where you want to take into consideration is stakeholder emotion. You know, where do you know kind of going in that you may get some pushback within your own organization? So think about those areas where you may have some stakeholder emotion. I'll never forget, we were working with a company down in Georgia. We had done some spend analysis for them. We had shown them some categories where we felt like we could take some costs out. You know, second meeting we had with those guys down there, about 15 people in the room, the CFO really kicked the meeting off by saying, you know, Gene, I know janitorial supplies are, you know, a pretty decent spend for us, but, you know, we're working with a local company here. We want to support that local business. So, you know, let's take that off the table. That's fine. You know, let's do that. Let's move away from, again, those areas where maybe there's some emotion and move to the areas where we can actually have an impact. Oh, by the way, we did later come back and do some analysis in that category for that particular client. We had in excess of 34% savings. The other thing you want to do is look for those categories where you can, again, build some momentum, have some quick wins, and importantly, gain some internal support. So now we're ready. We have our roadmap. We've done the analysis. We've kind of got our strategy mapped out. So now we're ready really to move to step 2, which I'm saying is let's look at becoming more strategic. Let's move away from the old tactical model to a more strategic model. You know, move away from where you just got people buying stuff and really put some strategy around your go forward path. One of the things you want to do is look to aggregating your spend and leveraging your spend across your organization. You want to, again, roll the numbers up, look at where you can leverage your spend across your company, or you may choose to come alongside a company like ours and TI Sourcing Group and let us work together with you to leverage that spend with other companies in more of a GPO, group purchasing organization type model. You also want to consider, as you're looking at moving to strategic, you'll want to consider involving your internal stakeholders. You know, oftentimes as we're working with companies, some of the most knowledgeable people in the room are those maintenance guys or those plant engineers, those people that are using these products day in and day out. So involve those internal stakeholders in the process. If you do so, not only are they providing knowledge that's important as you move forward, it also creates some buy-in on their part. It allows them to have a little skin in the game, which, as we'll talk about in a minute, can come in handy down the road, which kind of next step, it enables you to have a successful implementation. Again, if you involve these folks on the front end, it can certainly help as you move forward into implementation. And as many of us may know, that's a frequent area where we, you know, have a downfall, which really causes us to pause in the solutions that we're working towards, you know, getting put into place. Implementation can be tough. The other thing you want to do is identify an executive sponsor, and quite honestly, we could have had this as bullet point number 1. Having that executive sponsor will go a long way in allowing you to get your solutions negotiated and, more importantly, get those solutions implemented. One of the things you want to consider as you're moving to strategic is negotiating long-term agreements. You know, identify who those potential suppliers could be in terms of moving forward and getting in more of a strategic type mode. Establish what your current state is. You know, where are you today? You know, what are your baselines for pricing? You need to know that. It's hard to know where you want to go until you really understand where you are today. Understand what those key cost drivers are for that particular category. Next, you want to consider well, what is my desired state? Okay, I know where I am. Where do I want to go? We worked with a company a few years back, had a big corrugated spin. We went into the facility, and literally you almost couldn't move through the warehouse because there were corrugated boxes everywhere. You know, that was their current state. They were bringing in truckloads of boxes, getting a fairly good price, but their desired state was to get rid of some of that inventory, move to more of a just-in-time type model. So the chief operating officer looked at me and he said, "Gee, you know, really our desired state here is to get rid of some of this inventory, create some space, and yeah, if you could save us some money on our corrugate, that's great, but really we're looking for more of a solution that's just in time." And as some of you on the call may know, doing both of those can be challenging. And in that case, we actually were able to deliver savings and move to a just-in-time model. At this point, you want to move to really issuing your RFQ, and we could spend a whole another afternoon just talking about the steps around issuing an RFQ. We won't go into all those details today, but you want to get your RFQ out, and then once you get those results back in, then you'll want to measure that. You want to bounce off where you are today against those responses that you're getting in, and understand, you know, am I better off than what my current state is? So you'll want to measure those responses. From that, you'll want to identify who your top candidates are, conduct final negotiations, and then at that point, you'll be ready to move into executing agreements and implementation. And again, oh, by the way, there's that word implementation again. That can be oftentimes the most challenging. I was having lunch with a friend of mine just a couple of weeks ago, and one of the challenges he was facing within his own organization was being able to get those solutions implemented. This is an area where we, again, come alongside our clients and really assist in that implementation, again, to keep things moving forward. At this point, we want to talk about moving to a more proactive state versus reactive. At this point, we've done the hard work. We've negotiated agreements. We've implemented those agreements. So at this point, we want to talk about becoming more proactive. You'll want to initiate some SRM, supplier relationship management type initiatives within your organization. Understand that these supplier partners, and I like to look at them as strategic partners, are really the most knowledgeable on these particular categories. Recognize that these guys are the experts within these particular categories. You need to move to working in more of a collaborative role with these suppliers instead of the old traditional combative role, you know, where you're just kind of constantly beating your suppliers up. And again, involve your internal stakeholders in the supplier relationship meetings. You'll want to always push for continuous improvement. You know, look for the new, look for better. You know, I'll use the example here. You know, technology is always changing in all of these products. If you think about, and just take stretch film as an example, you know, that's one of those areas where the technology is changing and has changed significantly over the past, 3 to 5 years. It's not unreasonable to think that you can get a 47 gauge stretch film today that will perform equally as well as the 80 gauge that you've been buying for the last 15 years. Tremendous savings there in looking at, am I using the best product? Next, we want to talk about looking for the correct product. We worked with a client down in Alabama who was in what I consider really a heavy industrial machining, real hot environment. We had gone in, did some analysis for this client, and there was a glove that they were just blowing through. I mean, they couldn't keep the product in stock. They were using so many of these gloves. So, We got with our strategic partner. We asked them to bring in the manufacturer's rep from the glove company, and we did a survey. We just simply walked through that facility and did a survey of the products they were using, and come to find out the particular glove that they were blowing through that they couldn't keep in stock, really wasn't the best glove for that particular application. So an alternative product was recommended. Some samples were put in for the guys to try. Okay, the gloves, the price went up. The price went up 8%, because again, it's a better glove for the application. 3 months later, I followed up with the operations manager at that facility, and he said, Gene, we've noticed a considerable reduction in our usage of these gloves. I don't really have any numbers around it today, but check back with me. Check back with him in 6 months, and they had documented a 40% reduction in the usage on that particular glove. So again, I'm a Clemson grad. I didn't major in math, but even I can do the math around that. That's a pretty good deal. The other thing you want to consider, which really is somewhat what we just talked about, you want to talk about your consumption rate. I think too often as procurement professionals, we get locked in on, well, what's my piece price, without really any real consideration of what's the consumption. So work with your strategic partner, look at those consumption rates. Again, I'm using a lot of examples here, so bear with me. We had a company up in Virginia that we implemented some industrial vending solutions. Again, following up with that plant manager about a year into the program, they had noticed a 25 to 30% reduction in those products that was in the vending machines. And then lastly, you want to lean on your strategic partners for ongoing training. Make sure you're using these products properly, again, which will prolong their life. The other thing you'll want to do is, in terms of being more proactive, is you'll want to press in. Look for other areas where you can dive deeper into the organization. At this point, you've had some success, you've had some wins. You've made those wins known across your internal stakeholder team, hopefully as well as your executive team. So begin to look for areas where you can dive deeper into the organization to make a bigger impact. Perhaps it's some HR related type areas, some marketing related type expenses that traditionally have lived outside of the procurement department. Begin to look to press in to make more of an impact. And then last but certainly not least, avoid complacency. Don't stand on what I did yesterday. Again, always look for what I can do to improve my organization, what I can do to move the ball further down the field that will allow my company to win. So we'll move on to step 4. This is where we will look to measure, monitor, and then celebrate our wins. You'll want to implement some supplier reporting. This will increase your visibility. Again, going back to one of our first points, it's hard to manage what you don't have visibility of. So implement this reporting for increased visibility. The other thing that will do will allow you to drive utilization and compliance. This is a key area for us, and that we monitor and report back to our clients. It allows you to see those particular facilities or those individuals that are really supporting the effort, and maybe more importantly, identifying those who are not. The other thing you'll want to do is report savings. Again, you want to increase that visibility. Let folks within the company know where those wins have been and how those wins are making a positive impact to your bottom line. And in a sense here, you want to toot your own horn, because if you don't, no one else will. And then last, but certainly not least, having this visibility will allow you to rein in maverick spending. If we think of one of the key areas that can kill a real good solution with a company, is again having these individuals out there that want to continue to do it their way, continue to do it the old way. Having visibility and having this reporting will allow you to rein that maverick spend in and capture those lost savings and those lost dollars that you're not realizing today. The other thing you'll want to do as you move forward is you want to monitor the marketplace. You know, understand what's going on in these markets that can have an impact to your ongoing success. You'll want to mitigate risk. You know what is happening within your supplier partners that will help you mitigate risk. Know that your supplier partner is on solid ground financially. You know, just within the packaging world over the last 6 to 7 years, we've seen a considerable amount of consolidation of buyouts. That can have an impact, and know how that can impact your business and your supplier partner. You'll also want to consider pricing trends. You know, look at the indexes, know what's going on with these indirect expenses. You know, look at the steel markets, understand how that pricing can impact some of your MRO type products. You know, understand what's going on with pulp and paper. You know, how paper pricing is impacting your corrugate pricing, how chem data and resins, how petroleum prices are impacting your flexible pricing or products such as your stretch film, your poly bags, your poly wrap. You need to have a pulse on those markets. Again, this is an area where we provide quarterly reporting to our clients, so they have visibility of what's going on in all of these markets. The other thing you'll want to consider is external factors. You know, again, what's going on that's really beyond any of our control that could impact my pricing, and in some cases even impact the availability of some of these products. You know, tariffs have had a impact on some of these indirect product groups. You know, you think about, again, some of the poly products, some of the packaging products. You know, if we have right now, I think we have a hurricane brewing out off the Atlantic that may impact some of the items, some of the islands. If you have a hurricane in the Gulf Coast region, just know how that could impact some refinery operations, how that could impact some of these resin manufacturers, and not only what the impact would be, but also what the pricing impacts could be. Could go in short supply on some of those type products. So again, stay abreast and understand what those external factors are and how those external factors can impact you and your supply chain. Lastly, we want to talk about celebrating our wins. At this point, we've put the hard work in. Again, you want to involve your internal stakeholders. You know, make sure these folks understand that the work that's been put in has had a positive impact to my company and a positive impact on our bottom line. Recognize the key contributors. You know, call out those individuals. Again, make them feel part of the process, understand that they are part of the process, and recognize them as playing a key role in the positive impact. And then the next thing we want to do is continue to build momentum and build on these wins. And again, we can't emphasize that enough. So as we start to wrap up here and consider, you know, how do we really define success in managing these indirect categories, and really what causes our success? First is understanding that this is not a quick fix. You know, this is a multi-year program versus a one-time overnight project. This is an ongoing process, an ongoing program. Secondly, we'll recognize that allows us to be successful because this is built on increasing our visibility, having clean data that will then allow us to expedite and simplify our decisions as we move forward. Having this provides complete transparency of these expenses. What was once hidden, you know, now we have better visibility of, which will allow us to manage these indirect expenses. And lastly, it positions you to remain in control Again, what's unmanaged is now managed, and also is supported by the insight and expertise either that you have in-house, or again working with a team like TI's sourcing group. As we look at this last statement here, I like to say, given our expertise, the methodologies that we've had in place and doing this for just over 20 years now, the insight behind what we have, the visibility and working with multiple companies allows us to help all the way from the assessment process all the way through implementation. Our model is easy to lean on, easy to stand up, and lastly, we can really help expedite your process. The last analogy I'll use here right quick in terms of expediting the process, I got to thinking about being a Clemson guy. I got to thinking about football. And the last championship prior to 2016 that Clemson had won was in 1981. Danny Ford was the coach. He had a philosophy of tough-nosed defense. We're not going to give up any yards. We're going to keep you scoreless. And in that year, we went 12-0. A lot of low-scoring games. We won 3 games that year by scoring less than 2 touchdowns. Fast forward to 2018. New coach, different philosophy, 15-0, still won the national championship. In that year, we averaged 45 points a game. We scored over 50 points in 4 games, and many of our touchdown drives were in under 2 minutes. So my point is, you can win either way. You could methodically go down the field 3 yards in a cloud of dust, or you can allow TI sourcing group to come alongside you. We can move down the field faster. We can expedite your journey, and we can cause you to win faster. So with that, I'll finish and wrap up here. Again, Caroline is going to share some information with you in terms of our contact information, how you can get in touch with us, take advantage of the free spend analysis that we're offering, and also hopefully will allow us to have some time here for some Q&A. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for these insights, Gene. We've had several questions come in, so let's answer a few if you don't mind. The first one is, our company has grown through acquisition and we are very decentralized. How successful can we be in consolidating our spend in this environment?
Yeah, I think the key there, if you think about, again, a decentralized type company that's grown by acquisition, again, typically you've got folks that are kind of doing their own thing at a facility level. They've been doing it that way for years. So I think it's important there to make sure, as we talked about a little bit earlier, make sure you have that executive sponsor. Make sure you've got that key person that can help you pull some of this together. Again, you'll want to involve some internal stakeholders from those individual facilities so they have part of and own part of the process. So I think in that environment, it really is important to have some of those internal stakeholder teams that we talked about. That will allow you to be successful, to move through an implementation with a limited disruption and a limited amount of pushback. So again, I think involving those folks at those individual facilities will go a long way to allowing you to be successful.
Okay, question number 2 here is, when you talk about consumption rates and using the correct product, how can we know if we are or not?
Yeah, I think that's where you've got to really come in and lean on your strategic partner. Again, a lot of the companies we've worked with over the years, again, if we use stretch film as the example, they thought they were using the right product, and to a degree they were using a product that was okay. It's just that over the last several years, technology has changed in that particular arena. So now it just opens the door for tremendous savings if you're able to bring your strategic partner in do some analysis. I mean, it could be as simple as taking your load today, wrapping it just like you normally would, and then moving to one of these other more advanced products, one of these engineered films, wrap your product with it, and then weigh it. Just simply weigh the product that was used, and oftentimes you'll see that you're using 30% less product to get the same wrap. So again, lean on your strategic partner and let them help you walk through that analysis.
Another question here is, can you speak more to stakeholder emotion? How do we best overcome this?
Yeah, again, it's somewhat similar to the previous question, and oftentimes is what we find with someone that has a high stakeholder emotion. You need that executive sponsorship. Again, you need those folks to buy in to the process. And again, at the end of the day, depending on how much pushback you'll think you'll get to that particular category, that may not be the category you want to start with. Again, when you think about the indirect space and all the products and category groups that make that up, my suggestion would be to start with some other areas where you can gain some wins, gain some momentum, and then you gain that executive support. You've pretty much at that point proven to your organization that success that this process can bring, how it can impact your bottom line, which will then allow you to overcome some of that stakeholder emotion. At that point, you just start looking at the facts, you take emotion out of it.
Okay, I've got another one here for you. Can I shortcut the process and go straight to what I would consider the most impactful? And in your experience, which category would that most likely be?
I'm sorry, repeat that again, I'm sorry.
Can I shortcut the process and go straight to what I would consider the most impactful? And in your experience, which category would that most likely be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, we work with companies all the time that, our first initial conversation with them is, Gene, I know where we're spending our dollars. Can you help us with that? And so, yeah, we can absolutely jump straight into those categories. I think the area, again, if you look at the indirect space, the area that typically floats to the top is packaging, be it corrugate, be it flexible packaging. Typically companies, and we work with a lot of companies that are in manufacturing, in distribution, they make stuff, they ship stuff. So almost by default, packaging floats to the top. So if I had to pick one category, that would certainly be it.
Okay, and we've got one last question here. When only looking at AP level data, how can I know whether or not a particular company should be included as part of my indirect spend?
Yeah, that's again, step one. That's going through the AP data, looking at that point, you're just looking at a supplier name, you're looking at the total dollars that were spent with that supplier. And oftentimes it is challenging to really know what product group that supplier is applying for. Again, we've been doing this for 20 years, so I'm not going to say we've had visibility of all the suppliers out there, but we know most of them, and we know the products that they sell, so we're able to move through that fairly rapidly in terms of dumping that spend into those buckets. But if you don't know, and if we don't know, I mean, do what we do. Jump on Google that supplier, look and see, what is that supplier providing you? What do they sell? And load that spend into that bucket.
Great, thank you, Gene. And thank you all so much for joining us today. We certainly hope this presentation will help you manage your indirect spend to positively affect your bottom line. Again, as Gene mentioned, if you would like a free, no obligation spend analysis, please contact Gene directly at the email or the number listed on the screen, and we will contact you within the next 24 hours. Thank you again for spending time with us. Have a great day.